In this video, I'm going to show you how I started a very profitable software business from absolutely nothing. I started with no money and very little hardware, no software, and soon I was making really good money. What did my product actually do? It basically automated the process of writing documentation from computer source code. Primarily it was for active server pages, or classic ASP as it's known now. If you do any Microsoft development, you probably know C# and .NET, maybe also VB.NET. ASP was kind of the forerunner of this. It's very similar to PHP, which of course is still widely used today. So my tool speeded up the process of documenting software. It saves time and money. These are two very important words if you are starting a business and want it to be successful. Finally, my tool helped people to understand complex systems. Was my idea viable? If you're going to start a business, then this is the key question which you have to answer. I did a little research. It was actually possible to search the internet. Google was quite new at the time. But I did quickly find there were two similar products available to the one I was thinking of building. The breakthrough was when I found out I could actually take credit card orders online without having my own credit card account and complex bank things to set up. The downside is that they took 6.5% of the money I charged, which is actually quite high, but in those days it was fairly reasonable for what they did. So I absolutely bust my gut to release version 0.1. It was a very basic version, but after 2 weeks I made my first sale. It didn't actually cost me anything to start my business, nothing at all. I used my own computer. The first sales I actually made from my existing website. I just put a new page on my personal website. I didn't spend anything on marketing, nothing at all. I would say that this was quite a long time ago that I started the business. In fact, it was 2002, so it was kind of easier to market things online. There was a lot less competition, but you still can launch business ventures today without spending any money at all. Let's look at the systems architecture of what my tool was based on. It actually started as a Perl 5 script. I don't know if you've heard of Perl. It was quite popular around the 90s and early year zeros. It's an interpreted language, quite similar to Python actually. It was used for CGI scripting quite a bit. Some websites still use it today, but it's very difficult to find anybody that can still program with Perl. Most people have retired. So why did I use Perl? It's quite an obscure language. Even then it was fairly obscure. Speed was the main reason. It was exceedingly fast at text parsing, which was the kind of bulk of the activity of my application. At the time, Visual Basic was appallingly slow at parsing text files. C# and VB.NET a lot better, but that was the main reason why I used Perl. I did also knew the language very well, and I knew that it could do what my application had to do. So let's have a quick look at some architecture improvements I made to my application. One of my very first customers suggested that I compile the Perl and make a Windows executable file. There was actually a thing called Perl to exe, which I had to buy and then use it to make my Windows executable file. This was a big improvement because now customers could run my application without having to install Perl first. This was good in organizations that wouldn't let people install their own software. That's very common if you're ever selling business software. And the result really, more sales, so that was a big improvement, probably the biggest improvement I made. There was something else I did though to make a big improvement, and that's to create a graphical user interface. The tool was much easier to use now instead of typing command line options. And another advantage, it had a Windows installer so people could download the software and easily install it on their machines. Another benefit is it was really easy to make a trial version. If you're ever making software, then it's really important to make a trial version. People really like trial versions. This is a picture of the graphical user interface. This was built in Visual Basic 6. It's pretty similar to Visual Studio. You can make nice graphical user interfaces. Actually, I must say it was much easier in the old days, because now with like 4K monitors and different resolutions of monitors, it's quite hard to make a Windows application. My later graphical user interfaces for my other products have been a bit of a mess, but I thought this one looked pretty good actually. A couple of years later, I made a database documentation tool. This is the graphical user interface. This one sold quite well for a while, and this one I built completely in Visual Basic. Here is some of the output from my original tool. It basically goes through the source code and compiles it into a help document. This is the old Windows help file format. And so you get a list of pages in the website on the left hand side, and there's also a list of functions, subroutines, variables, and everything else in the application source code. Another big advantage of this is that you can use the index, and there's also a search facility if you want to search for a particular function. Also, the source code is color coded, which makes it much easier to read, and it also puts on line numbers. This is just the kind of thing that you need if you just joined a company and want to figure out how an application works, and there are many other uses. It did also export a list of functions and other things in a web application. A lot of people at the time had to spend time documenting every single function in their application, and the first thing, if you want to do that, is to find out what all your functions are actually called. So this was a huge time saver for a lot of people. How did I sell products? As I said before, I made a website. I showed screenshots of the product. Ideally make them so you can click on them and see the full size ones. People are very interested in screenshots. Definitely when you're selling a product, emphasize the benefits. People buy things based on benefits. Will they save time? Will they save money? What else will it do for them? Definitely emphasize benefits rather than the features. As I said before, a free trial version is really useful, so I made a free trial version. It didn't do everything that the full one did. I think it was limited to documenting 20 web pages or something. So this worked very well indeed. I can highly recommend this. Also, people like software that's easy to buy, so I partnered with a company called RegSoft. Later they became RegNow. They've been bought about 5 times since. I think now they're called 2Checkout. There are various other companies that allow you to sell software online. You can use PayPal, which are quite cheap, but PayPal are not a good company to do business with. I actually got banned from PayPal for a completely unrelated reason, but it's best to use a professional company rather than PayPal. Here I'll go through some of the good and not so good decisions I made with my business. If you're starting your own software business, then definitely you want to watch here, because I made some really good decisions and also some really bad ones. The best thing I did was to rush out a first version to test demand, like will people actually buy my product? I've often heard stories of like developers spending 6 months, a year, 3 years writing a product. Then they release it and realize nobody's going to buy it. So if you want to sell software, then just rush out of version 1.0 or 0.1. It doesn't have to do much, but you just need to test the market. I made 3 more products, maybe more products. I think I had about 5 products at one stage. I started with an ASP documentation tool, then I did one for PHP, then one for .NET, and finally one for SQL Server. The PHP one sold very poorly. Once I had 2 products, then I could sell both products in a bundle. This can be very lucrative. The most money I made was when I sold the ASP and the .NET documentation tool as a bundle. This was very popular. Another thing I did that you might not think about but can be very lucrative is that I charged extra for the source code. I think my basic product was $39 or $49, but I charged them $69 if they actually wanted the source code as well. So this is something you can definitely consider for your business. The risk is that somebody might release the source code, although I never actually found that to be a problem in all the time I was running my business. After a few years, I made a site license option and I charged nearly $250 for that. As you can imagine, when I sold one of those, it was a very good day indeed. As I said before, product bundles were successful. Another thing I highly recommend is if you make money from a side venture, then don't go and spend it. Invest it in your own future and your family's future. I actually bought a rental apartment from my profits, and I bought stocks, bonds and commercial property. The result from that is that actually, while my software business isn't really around anymore, I actually make the same amount of money from the investments I bought than I did from the original software business. So I made a few mistakes. Yeah, my product prices were way too low. Businesses, if you're selling to a business, B2B like I was, then businesses don't really worry too much about price. If something saves them money, then they will buy it. You have to remember that nowadays, like software developers, contractors cost like $400 to £500 a day. That's nearly like $1,000 a day. So they're not going to worry if software costs like $50 or $500. So I definitely could have charged a lot more for my software. And I spent very little on advertising. I think I spent about $75 putting it on one of the biggest software download sites, but that turned out to be a waste of money. I didn't really reach out to influencers, although to be fair, there weren't quite as many as there are these days. Something I heard before is that you should probably sell a business after 7 years. This is very true, and really maybe I should have tried to sell my business at the peak instead of keeping it forever. I would have got pretty good money, although problem is my tools were so specialised, I don't know if I would have found a buyer. It might have been quite difficult. I had occasional technical support, but on the whole I have to say that I didn't have too many problems. I had a few bug fixes. Some of the applications my tool was used on were enormous, absolutely enormous. So if you are building a tool, then always consider scalability. Refunds can be a problem when you're selling things online. I think I only ever made 2 refunds. I was mostly selling to businesses, and occasionally businesses would have very convoluted purchasing requirements. I tended to ignore most emails I got unless it was for like a site license or order. I'm not going to spend half a day doing paperwork to make like a $50 sale, so that was something I did experience when selling to businesses. Later, I did encounter people having installation problems. If you install an application these days, you might have noticed on Windows, maybe on Macs and other things, that sometimes the application won't install because the operating system says it doesn't trust the application or doesn't know it. This is very common if you're releasing small scale applications. And also my program used to write to the program files directory, and Obviously you can't really do that anymore in Windows. On to marketing. Basically, I use the if they build it, they will come mentality. It does work. I basically put my application up on my website and somebody did actually buy it. I also used article marketing. I wrote articles about my tool, put it on my website, so people found it through search engine or other means, read about my tool, then downloaded it and bought it. That was very successful. I did actually write a few articles about SQL and ASP coding. They got tremendous number of views and I made quite a few sales from those. Even though they weren't directly related to my tool, people just saw the links to my tool and would download it, so they could be quite useful as well. And I did make use of affiliate schemes. If you're releasing software, then this is a good way to market your products. Affiliates were people who marketed my software on my behalf. So they marketed my product, and each sale they made, they got a 25% commission, and I would get 75%. Most were lazy and didn't really do anything. They just put a link on their site. They didn't review the product or anything. They didn't really add value. Let's have a quick look at sales sources. This was 2008. This was the best year of my software business. So customer source here and how much money I made from each source. So by far the biggest source of revenue was for people searching for my tool in Google. So that was the bulk of the income. I made, after that, quite a lot of money. I'm not sure where my sales sources were from. This is probably because when selling business to business software, person A, i.e. the software developer, will download the product, investigate it, and then somebody else in the purchasing department will actually buy the software. So as a result, your affiliate tracking can't be very successful in this kind of situation. Then after that we have a list of mostly download sites. Programmer's Heaven, think of it, Blue Chilies, Softpedia, that was quite a big download site. This was super shareware. On to sales by country, and if you make money online, then you'll know that America is a massive market. So most of my software tools were bought by customers in the US. So I would say maybe 70% of my sales were from the US. The UK, obviously a big English speaking market. After that it was a long list of other countries. Here's my sales chart. I still occasionally sell one today, but I kind of lost interest in compiling the data after 2013. So I started, this might be a bit small, but I started the business in May 2002. I sold one in May 2002. I think the next one is June. I sold 2. But then you see in July I sold 8, and fast forward to a few years, the peak was in summer of 2008. I sold a record 81 products that month, so that was a very good month indeed. After that the sales started declining quite rapidly. Here's another chart. This shows my annual sales. I got bored with making charts after 2010, so I don't know what the values are there. So as you can see, I had a very substantial increase between 2002 and 2003. 2005 was when I made my database product. That resulted in quite a big surge in revenue. I think I started the site license option that year, which was also good for business. Why did my business die? It's not truly dead actually. I still sell occasional software products, although not nearly as many as I used to. I think that sales definitely follow a long tail curve. You've probably seen this from other scenarios, for example in long tail keyword research. So basically it started, it went up, it was very high, and then sales declined, gradually went down and down and down. So sales have not got to zero, maybe they never will, but sales now are very, very low indeed. What was the biggest reason of my sales collapse? Mostly because my best-selling tool became less popular. It was based on active server pages, which kind of got replaced around 2003, 2004 when .NET became more popular. I had a .NET documentation tool, but I just couldn't keep up with the changes to the C# programming language in the early years. A big problem with software businesses at the time is that you would build something really popular, then Microsoft would say, oh, this is really good, let's put it in Windows. The obvious example here is with web browsers. So they saw that Netscape was really popular, so they decided to make Internet Explorer and include it in Windows. So overnight that pretty much killed like the Netscape web browser. I did actually have this problem because later versions of .NET had documentation tools built into it. That had a severe impact on my business because people didn't need my tools anymore. It was built into Visual Studio. Later versions of Visual Studio had this documentation tool built in. It was pretty amazing, much better than mine. They had a whole team working on this, and there was no way I could really compete with this. Another big problem I found was the rise of open source software, GitHub repos. This is a major problem if you want to release software and make money from it these days. So this is something called NDoc. It was an open source project. It did a very similar thing to one of my products, and I think a lot of people started using this rather than buying my own product. Of course, open source isn't without problems. The person who started this later abandoned it, so it was only available for a couple of years. Open source isn't necessarily a bad thing. Many open source software developers make a lot of money either from showcasing their work or selling services, but that's another story for a different video. Finally, I had a lot more competition from big companies. Redgate released a documentation tool for SQL databases. Theirs was absolutely amazing. I don't know if they make it anymore. However, the company is still around and they have a lot of products. I should also mention that 2008 there was a massive financial crash, so that had quite a significant impact on my business, I think. Finally, something that really changed the business environment for my product, there was a huge move towards self-documenting code. I found this Stack Overflow article from 2008, and at this time the idea of self-documenting code became a lot more popular, and it's still very popular today. There is one more reason why my business became less popular. I simply moved on to other things. This is very common for people who are entrepreneurs and starting their own businesses. So in 2009 I found this website called the Warrior Forum. It's still around today. I'll put a link in the description below. So I quickly lost interest in my software business, and instead I started a highly profitable blogging business. So how much money did my business make? In total I made this amount, which is just over $100,000. That's before tax, of course. So I'm nearly at the end of the story of my own business. Here's a few more tips about if you want to start your own software business. And if you have any ideas or want questions answered or anything else, then please do drop comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. So we'll clear up a few misconceptions here. The first misconception is that code quality is important. Let me tell you, if you are making a product and you sell it, your code quality doesn't really matter at all. I've had some terrible arguments at job interviews about this, but it's true. My original code was pretty terrible, but the product was good, it got the job done, it solved a problem, and it made money. Do you need money to start a business? No, I started my business with absolutely nothing. You don't need a team to start a business. I did everything myself. Do you need a lot of time to start a business? Not necessarily. I was actually unemployed for about 8 months when I started this business, so this was very useful, although I didn't spend all day, every day working on the business. For most of the time when I was running my business, I had a full-time job at the same time and managed to run my business as a side hustle. Now it's your turn. Here's some quick tips about how to start your own software business. So first thing, you need to find a problem. Problems are very common in particular businesses. I have a friend who's a doctor, and he says there's just so many opportunities in the medical niche for starting software businesses. Law and insurance are two other niches that are really good for starting software startups. You can also sell to consumers. Potential numbers of sales are a lot bigger, but individual people are a lot pickier, and you'll get a lot more refunds and a lot more grief from customers. Also, there's a lot more competition selling general products to people. So if you find a problem, then you can find a solution. If you want to know if your idea is really good, then have a look. And if you find about one competitor but less than 3, then that is quite a good business. If you search and realize there's no software that does what your software is going to do, then maybe there's just no demand for it, so that can be a red flag. Obviously, you need to find a way to monetize your solution. If you make software, then you can charge money for it. Obviously, you can also make an app, like a paid app or a advertising supported app. I don't know too much about app development, that's something I've not got into. Or you can make a software as a service and charge people a monthly fee, or make it free and have advertising on it. Finally, yes, hopefully you should be able to get rich from your products. If you have any questions about starting a business or ideas, or want any other help at all, then drop a comment below and I'll try my best to answer your questions. Thanks for watching.